Lincoln Financial Field, home to Eagles practice this afternoon. The turf over at the NovaCare complex, a bit snow-covered, a little frozen, a bit crunchy. So the Eagles practiced at the Link today. Saquon Barkley practiced, which is a good sign. He was listed as a DNP yesterday with a stinger. But Jalen Carter, Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson, and Fred Johnson did not practice. We welcome you to Birds Huddle, presented by Toyota, official automotive partner of the NFL. Let's huddle up. Michael Barkan along with Reuben Frank, John Clark, and Dave Zangaro will stop by later in the program. Rube, the Birds can clinch the NFC East with a win in Washington Saturday night. That would make them the first back-to-back NFC East champs in more than 2 decades. When you look at the landscape in this division moving forward, do the Eagles have a solid chance to build a dynasty here?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of on their way to that. They got the best owner in football. They got the best GM in football. They have a head coach who's got like the 5th best one-loss record in history. They got a Super Bowl MVP quarterback. They've got this young defense, and these guys just keep getting better and better. So when you look at the other teams in the division, you look at the quarterbacks first. I mean, Dak Prescott's still a good player, but he's 33. He's not going to be doing this much longer. The other 2 teams have talented young kids that they don't know what to do with and they can't protect. So I think when you look at the quarterbacks, I mean, the Eagles have such a big advantage. And I'd be surprised if they don't go on another run here, kind of like 01 to 04 when they did win 4 straight division titles.
Chances the other teams gain their footing and give a little push?
You look at their track records. I mean, none of these are successful franchises over the last 20 years, really. I mean, none of them have had the kind of success the Eagles have had, and I don't think they really have the people in charge who know what to do to get to that point.
All right, that brings us to our 3-point stance, presented by Toyota. The Eagles' defense is looking elite again, and it's not just because they shut out the Raiders Sunday. Since the Week 9 bye, 6 weeks, the Eagles have allowed the fewest points per game in the NFL. Rube, you wrote about Vic Fangio today on NBC Sports Philadelphia.com. How much credit should Fangio receive for his ability to adapt and adjust as the season goes along?
Ton of credit. And he also got a lot of pieces that he didn't have early in the year, like N'Kobe and Jalen Phillips. Nolan Smith came back after missing 5 games. So he's got better players as well, and that's a big difference. But I talked to a bunch of the defensive players on Tuesday, and they all said the same thing, that his ability to adjust both in games and just be a better coach by the 4th quarter, just by understanding what the offense is trying to do. And as the season goes along, understanding his personnel better and how to deploy them, what combinations work the best. Those are 2 things that stand out. And a couple guys said they're just really impressed that an older coach, and he's been doing this 47 years now, is not tied to any one scheme, any one approach. He's got the flexibility that a lot of older coaches don't have. And if something doesn't play into what he's always done because he has different kind of personnel, he'll do that. So he's not stubborn like a lot of older coaches that you see. And look, they've had some great defensive coordinators, from Marion Campbell, had the #1 defense back-to-back years in 80 and 81, and Jim Johnson, we all know all about him, and Wade Phillips. They've had some really good defensive coaches, Jim Schwartz, the Super Bowl year. But I'll tell you what, I mean, Vic Fangio, what he's been able to do is as good as any of them.
You're going back a ways, all the way to
Swampy was not a great head coach, but he was a heck of a DC.
Stance number 2, short weeks have played a factor in the Eagles' inconsistency this season. This will be the 5th short week in this season's schedule, the most since Nick Sirianni has been the head coach. They're 2-2 in those games so far. Rube, how much has the disruption to the normal weekly routine led to some of the ups and downs we've seen this season?
Yeah, I don't see a big connection there. I don't think that's it. I think if I made a list of all the things that contributed to their inconsistency, what day of the week they were playing on wouldn't be at the top of the list. I just think they had a lot of things to figure out as far as coaching and personnel and their approach. And look, I'm not saying they've figured them all out yet. Just because you beat the Raiders, you're not going to have much of a parade. But from the players who talked about it, these guys just kind of have this mentality of whenever we're supposed to play, we'll go out there and play. And they prepare the same way. They just have one less week, one less day, or one more day, or a couple more days. I don't think it's a huge deal. when you're this good, when you're a Super Bowl type of team and a contender every year, you're going to get a lot of night games. You're going to get a lot of games that you're the only team on TV at that point. Or there's another team, whoever you're playing is on TV as well. But I think it's something when you're an elite team you have to deal with.
All right, tomorrow's show's at 10 a.m. We'll see how you do.
Can't do it.
You're going to be here. Stance number 3. We should be thankful that the NFL schedule makers gave a nice holiday gift to the Eagles. 2 games against the 4-10 Washington Commanders in the final 3 weeks. We know it'll be Marcus Mariota instead of Jaden Daniels at quarterback Saturday night. Daniels has been shut down for the rest of the season with a dislocated elbow. Rube, this is a team that reached the NFC title game last season against the Eagles. How surprised are you that it seemingly spiraled so quickly out of control in Washington?
Not shocked, and I think I said this before the season even began. I thought they were primed for a big drop-off just because this is the oldest team in football. You can't sustain success when you're as old as that. They signed all these older guys. They were unable to protect their young elite quarterback, who's really, really good. And you just hope he doesn't end up like another RG3 because, it kind of seems like history is repeating itself. But they scare me just because Washington has beaten the Eagles in some games where you just think it's not going to be competitive. There's something about that team. They've upset them a few times. That's why I'm just a little skittish about talking about the division title yet because they haven't locked it up. I think they will. I think they will beat Washington. Mariota is one of the better backups. He was here a year, one of the better backups in the league. Their defense is awful. It's just terrible. So I think the Eagles can keep the kind of offensive momentum going on Saturday afternoon. But that team always scares me.
Should they fail to beat Washington in both games, they still have the Bills. So that's a cream puff. That's easy.
And Dallas is not going to win out.
And Dallas is not going to win out.
I do think the Eagles will take care of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ruben Frank, we thank him.
That's it?
Yes. I'll see you Saturday on Pre-Game Live. Up to the challenge presented by First Trust Bank, official bank of the Eagles. The Birds have advanced to the Super Bowl 5 times in franchise history. You know how many playoff road games they played in those 5 runs to the Super Bowl? How about 0? Wow. Nick Sirianni is 5-0 at home and 0-2 on the road in his playoff career. Both losses coming at Tampa Bay. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dave Zangaro and John Clark in studio. Guys, this leads to one of the major questions facing Sirianni and the Eagles down the stretch. John, let's assume the Birds take care of business Saturday in Washington, clinch the division. How do you think they'll try to balance going for the highest possible seed versus resting banged up guys?
Such a great question because I think there's different parts of the team that do need rest. I think the offensive line needs a lot of rest. And I think if you can get Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, and even Lane Johnson, who's going to be coming back from injury, if you can get them to rest, probably Jordan Mailata as well, I think that behooves you to rest the offensive line. If you rest the offensive line, you're not going to have your quarterback behind there. So I would lean towards resting the final week, obviously. I don't know if they'll rest everybody with 2 weeks left. But I do think the offensive line could really be helped out by some rest. That is the key position that I think would be helped out.
Dave, you get the rest if you win the top seed. Do you think about that?
Yeah, the top seed is going to be really tough to get. I don't think that really factors in. What it comes down to is you might have a chance to get that 2 seed. And that 2 seed is valuable. You're guaranteed 2 home games if you get it. They have a decent shot at that right now. So if you're going into these last 2 weeks of the season and you have a shot to get that, as much as the rest would help, I think you got to play it out. I think you have to at least try to get that 2 seed, the guarantee of those home games, if you can.
But it brings up the inverse, which is, can they get to the Super Bowl on the road, Dave? Can they do it this year?
Yeah, I think they can. They've been a pretty good road team, especially if one of those road games is L.A., where they've had a lot of success, where Eagles fans generally take over. I think that is something they can do. You don't want to have to do that. I mean, we've seen how successful they are when they get to be at home. Last year, kind of a blessing, right? They end up gifted that NFC Championship game at home. That meant a lot to them, and they didn't have to go on the road. So I think that matters. You want to try to get as many home games as possible. It's a weird thing because you're balancing it, like John mentioned. That rest would really help, but as long as you're alive to get the higher seed, you have to go for it.
Former 3-time Pro Bowler Greg Olsen will call Saturday's Eagles-Commanders game on Fox alongside Joe Davis and Pam Oliver. Earlier today, John caught up with Olsen for the Takeoff podcast. Here's Greg Olsen assessing the Eagles' chances in the NFC playoffs.
It's a crazy conference. I think anybody that gets in has a shot to win any of the rounds, and I would put the Eagles obviously clearly in that picture because they've been there before, they've done it, and you never sleep on talent. If I'm Philly, I'm feeling very good about my postseason chances of making a run. Yes, my offense needs to continue to find their groove consistently, but your defense in the playoffs is significant.
John, Greg Olsen also called Sunday's game and the Eagles win over the Raiders. What was your take on his take about the state of the Eagles right now?
Well, I think he agrees with a lot of us that the Eagles have a championship defense. They have a championship-level defense to get it done. The offense, we still need to see more of, but he really likes some of the changes they made. And on this podcast, he really went into detail about how they've changed the running game. And you heard Saquon Barkley mention this to Nick Sirianni on Hard Knocks. They're running a lot more inside zone. And, you know, the one thing I noticed is they're not pulling the guards and pulling their offensive linemen as much, maybe because they're not as healthy as they were.
Can't reach those blocks.
Yeah, can't get out ahead for the block. So he does a great job of breaking down the changes they've made with the running game and the changes they've made with the passing attack. And if they can kind of marry all that together and then get better at it, and it's almost like you're practicing it all. You're working it in the games, more under center, more crossing patterns, less hitch routes, things like that. If you can get all this going in the last couple weeks, maybe this offense can become dangerous going into the playoffs if you can get that running game going. But he also likes the Eagles' chances because they've got that defense that can travel everywhere. In my personal opinion, I'm not afraid of going anywhere but Seattle, because Seattle has a great defense, and at home, when you're an offense on the road in Seattle, that is a tough place to play with the noise and going silent count and all that. The defense kind of having that extra half a second to get after you. So Seattle's the only place that I would really fear going in the playoffs.
Dave, where's your favorite spot if the Eagles have to go on the road?
Well, you know, I think the toughest team is still the Rams, and it's a team that almost took them out at home here at the Link last year. That's a really good offense, a good defense. They have the most veteran quarterback, the guy who's probably going to win the MVP award this year. And it's a weird deal because we know the Eagles already beat the Rams this year. They beat them last year. But to me, that is the toughest team in the NFC right now. So, and I also think they're a different team than when the Eagles faced them earlier in the season.
By the way, when Dave said they narrowly beat them last year, I was thinking this year when it took Jordan Davis to block the field goal. Without that, you know, the Rams beat them. So twice, you know, they escaped Jalen Carter last year, and then Jordan Davis.
Exactly, yeah.